Welcome to the St. George's University School of Medicine virtual White Coat Ceremony. I am Dr. Gabrielle Walker-Bideau, currently an assistant professor within the Department of Physiology, Neuroscience, and Behavioral Science. I also serve as an assistant provost for the University Academic and Student Affairs here at SGU. I like to think of myself as a medical doctor by profession and a medical educator by vocation. Although my medical qualifications were earned in Guyana, I can proudly share the sentiment of being an SGU grad because I completed not only my postgraduate studies in medical education here, but also my master's in business administration with a focus on health sector administration. On that note, congratulations on joining this amazing family. I remember my very own white coat experience. Almost 20 years ago, I felt a sense of pride to be able to wear the most recognizable symbol, which says, I am a scientist. This moment is a big deal. The white coat comes with great responsibility. As doctors, we are expected to demonstrate competencies in patient care, medical knowledge, professionalism, systems-based practice, practice-based learning, interpersonal, and communication skills. To whom much is given, much is expected. The white coat ceremony tradition began in 1993 when the Arnold P. Gold Foundation created the white coat ceremony at Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons to promote humanism in medicine with guidance from the Gold Foundation. St. George's University of Medicine initiated its own white coat ceremony in 1996, long before many other U.S. medical schools. In 2003, the Gold Foundation founded the Gold Humanism Honor Society, widely known as GHHS, an international society dedicated to promotion of humanism, professionalism, and ethics in medical practice and education. Dr. Gold was an international advocate for humanism in healthcare. We're honored to have hosted Dr. Gold and his wife Sandra as keynote speakers for our own Spring 2005 White Coat Ceremony. SGU's chapter of GHHS is based in the Bioethics Division of the Department of Clinical Skills and is supported by the Dean of Medicine's office. Our chapter established the Humanism Student Organization, HSO, in 2009, through which basic sciences students promote humanism across the SGU and Grenadian communities. Chapter members are nominated by their peers and inducted during their clinical training when they participate in an ongoing chapter project. I now take great pleasure in introducing Dr. Glenn Jacobs, Provost of St. George's University.
Good day. I'm Dr. Glenn Jacobs, Provost of St. George's University, and I'm delighted that you could join us at this virtual white coat ceremony. I want to start by expressing how grateful I am to celebrate this momentous occasion in your lives. I'm proud of how you continue to adapt to the various changes due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Although these experiences may be challenging at times, it will contribute to your resilience as a person, which will help you navigate life as you grow personally and professionally throughout your time at SGU and thereafter. We remain dedicated to supporting you as you start your journey in the School of Medicine. I'm looking forward to the day when all of you will be back on campus, and I trust that that will be in the near future. But for now, focus on how this pledge of commitment to your chosen lifelong profession brings you together as future physicians. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Marius Lucas, Dean, School of Medicine, St. George's University.
Welcome and congratulations for your acceptance at St. George's University. I'm Dr. Marius Lucas and I'm the Dean of School of Medicine. The faculty and I in Grenada are looking forward to your arrival in August. Let's reflect on few of the principles of the oath you will affirm upon graduation from this institution, but also the professionalism commitment during your white coat ceremony. At the heart of the oath and professionalism commitment is to treat the sick to the best of your ability, to preserve patient privacy, and to safeguard life. It is also close to mind the responsibility to share your wisdom with others. I recognize that in entering the field of medicine, you will join a community where the team is of utmost importance to success as compared to individual effort. To this end, you must strive for excellence in your pursuit of knowledge. As you wear these white coats, you will pledge an oath of professionalism and service. While these values are under attack, they are a necessary requirement in medical practice. Professionalism is a commitment to integrity, altruism, competence, and ethics in the service of others. As a physician, you must constantly balance the needs of your patients, and all of us, we must endeavor to honor the sacred trust and privilege that the society places in medical professionals, cognizant that the standard is an idea that we must continuously aim to achieve. I welcome you to the noble profession of medicine. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to the Senior Associate Dean of Basic Sciences, Dr. Mark Kluntz.
I'd like to welcome the students, their families and supporters, and the faculty of St. George's University School of Medicine. It's my pleasure to join you again, this time virtually, in this white coat ceremony. I had the pleasure of meeting you all already here in Grenada or online during orientation week. So most of you know that I am Mark Kluntz, the Senior Associate Dean of Basic Sciences here in Grenada. Orientation week is always a joy to participate in, to welcome you to Grenada and St. George's University, and to share your first days in Grenada as you experience the excitement and trepidation of the transition to your new life and to the start of your MD training with St. George's University. We talked at orientation about the MD programme objectives and the domains that the SGU curriculum determined to be an important part of physician training. We talked about the central role of professional identity in your development. The white coat ceremony is a clear and outward signal of that professional identity and its commitment. It's an important milestone in signalling to your peers, faculty, and to your friends and family that you have now started on a pathway to a new career. A career where professional identity is central to your role with patients and your peers, and a requirement as a member of a defined community of professional healers. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. G. Richard Olds. Dr. Olds has been an educator, physician, and administrator during his distinguished career, spanning more than 30 years. Dr. Olds became president of St. George's University in Grenada on the 28th of August 2015. Prior to joining SGU, he was the Vice-Chancellor for Health Affairs and founding Dean of the School of Medicine at the University of California at Riverside. In 2010, Dr. Olds joined UCR to lead the creation of that new School of Medicine, the first LCME-accredited medical school in California in more than 4 decades. Dr. Olds is a graduate of Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine and trained in internal medicine at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. He was an infectious disease fellow and one of the nation's first geographic medicine fellows at University Hospitals of Cleveland, where he also served as medical chief resident and faculty member. He served as a full professor of medicine, pediatrics, molecular cell and developmental biology at Brown University. He was professor and chairman of medicine at the Metro Health campus of Case Western Reserve. His role at UCR was preceded by a decade-long stint as professor and chair of medicine at the Medical College of Wisconsin. In addition to his academic background, Dr. Olds is a tropical disease specialist with extensive experience working in Asia and Africa. He has over 100 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters, primarily on international health topics. He currently serves on a World Health Organization expert panel and was chairman of the board of a large Gates Foundation project to deworm children in sub-Saharan Africa. I'm very happy to introduce you to Dr. G. Richard Olds.
Well, welcome to St. George's University's White Coat Ceremony for the School of Medicine. I'm Dr. Richard Olds, and I'm the president of St. George's University, and it's my pleasure to be the keynote speaker today. Now, I should start by telling you a bit of bad news. When you put on that white coat today, you're not going to know one bit more medicine. You're not going to know any more about health and disease, about how to treat people with illness, etc. But when you do put on that white coat, you basically assume a very important mantle of the healthcare profession. And that is to behave in a professional manner and to interact with all members of humanity in a thoroughly professional and thoughtful way. And that's really the meaning of the white coat. Now, you might wonder, how did this white coat ceremony actually end up starting? Well, historically, physicians actually didn't wear white coats. Through really the middle of the 19th century, physicians actually wore black frocked coats. And it wasn't really until the twin forces of the beginning of the 20th century and the end of the 19th century that white became synonymous with physicians. The first influence was Louis Pasteur and the germ theory of medicine, and white increasingly became popular because it symbolized sterility and cleanliness, which was an important part of health and disease once we understood the importance of germs. The second was the wedding of the medical profession with, if you will, the scientific knowledge that we had about health and disease. So, if you will, the lab coat of the scientist became the white coat of the physician. And so, at the beginning of the 20th century, white coats were virtually synonymous with being a physician. But interestingly, the white coat ceremony is a relatively new phenomenon. Started actually in the 1990s at Columbia University School of Medicine. And why was that? Well, in 1950, we did a survey of who were the three most admired professions in the United States. And those professions were doctors, clergy, and teachers. Now, they repeated that survey in 2000, and the three most admired professions were clergy, teachers, and nurses. Doctors were no longer in that very top of the most admired professions. Now, granted, we hadn't fallen all the way to used car salesmen and lawyers, but physicians were no longer in the top tier of most admired professions. Now, when you think about it, society imbues upon doctors in training immense opportunities to learn your craft. Think about it. We are allowed to examine patients' bodies. We share with our patients the most intimate details, often details that they would not even share with their loved ones. And that position afforded even beginning doctors is an important part of that relationship between society and those in the medical profession. So the white coat ceremony was started at the beginning of your medical education to symbolize the importance of professionalism and interactions with your patients and their families. And that importance of that interaction is symbolized by wearing that white coat. Now, the bad news is when you put on that white coat, you're not going to know one more medical fact. You're not going to know anything more than you know at this very moment about health and disease. But when you put on the white coat, you assume the mantle of a physician, and you will be held responsible for behaving in a professional and thoughtful way from here on for the rest of your career. Now, throughout history, how did physicians gain that respect from society? Well, we could go way back to the Middle Ages during the Black Death or the bubonic plague. During that time, physicians and other healthcare providers often cared for the dead and dying at a time where there was significant risk to themselves personally. And unfortunately, because of fear of that disease, sufferers of the bubonic plague were often left completely alone and isolated. So physicians had to not only care for those patients, but they were often the only ones there in their most needy time. Now, we have experienced similar episodes throughout history. Probably during the late 19th century, tuberculosis was very common in the United States, and many physicians, in fact, acquired tuberculosis as part of their care of those patients. And again, that assuming both risk and again having consumption carried with it significant social stigmata. Physicians and nurses were often the only people present with our patients in their most needy times. There was, of course, the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. In my own lifetime, the HIV epidemic of the late 70s and early 80s. And of course, all of us are now living through several years of the COVID-19 pandemic, where many patients spend their last few days in intensive care units, often intubated, where the only individuals that interacted with them at their time of greatest need were healthcare professionals like doctors and nurses. That's really what the symbolism is of the white coat. Now let me end today's talk with a personal story that I hope makes some of the points that I'm trying to make. Now, as with all stories, you need a little bit of background. And this story takes place back in the late 1970s when I was an infectious disease fellow at University Hospitals of Cleveland. And this was at the very beginning of the AIDS epidemic. In fact, it was so early that we only knew this disease as an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. We actually had no idea what caused AIDS. We had not discovered the HIV viruses. We didn't know exactly how it was transmitted. And there was a tremendous amount of fear, not only among the general population, but even among healthcare professionals. Young men would often come in with AIDS. The risk factors were an odd group of hemophiliacs that got concentrate from units of blood. Those had recently had blood transfusions. Those men that had sex with men, and those that were intravenous drug abusers. And among that group, there was a tremendous stigmata for those that actually had AIDS. Well, I can remember one afternoon admitting a young black male to university hospitals. And he was unfortunately fairly typical of the late presentation patients with AIDS. He had Kaposi's sarcoma, an unusual cancer seen almost exclusively with patients with AIDS. He had pneumonia. We had not yet discovered that that was probably caused by pneumocystis carinii. And he had major lesions in his central nervous system, probably disseminated toxoplasmosis. In that day and age, the prognosis for such a patient was often measured in terms of days and weeks rather than months and years. And we had virtually nothing that we had to treat those patients successfully. Now, I still remember sitting down with Mr. Brown and talking to him about what was going on. And he was very depressed and very scared. At that day and age, being a male homosexual, there was tremendous ostracization that took place in the black community in Cleveland. And because of the fear of AIDS, his more recent friends and colleagues completely shunned him once the diagnosis was known. And so he was very alone and very scared. And when I sat next to him and was talking to him, I asked him finally, was there anything that I could do to make him feel more comfortable? He said, would you mind just staying and talking to me? I'm afraid to be alone. Well, this wasn't a big deal for me. I had many patients in the hospital and I was on call that night. So I wheeled the chart rack into the bedside and I did all of my charting and other work sitting there next to him on the bed and talking with him. And about 10:30 that night, he fell asleep. In fact, actually, he probably went into coma. And he passed away a couple hours later. So that wasn't a big thing to do. I had to be there anyway. But Ultimately, he needed to have somebody with him. He didn't want to die alone. And if there wasn't anyone else that could play that role, it had to be me. And that's the meaning of wearing that white coat. Now, I'm sure all of your family and friends are very proud of you today, and it's with great excitement that you put on that white coat. But when you put it on, remember that it signifies what's really most important among physicians. Your faculty will teach you all about health and disease, how to diagnose disease, how to treat it, etc. But it's your patients that will teach you how to be a better doctor. Listen to them. That's the message of the white coat, and welcome to the noble profession of medicine. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Olds, for those inspiring words. I would now like to introduce our white coat recipients. The white coat serves as a symbol of your entry to the profession and your commitment to uphold the duties and trust associated with medicine and medical training. Congratulations to you all. I would now like to lead our white coat recipients in reciting the professional commitment. This commitment was written by a student task force in 1995. It has been recited at each of our School of Medicine white coat ceremonies. I also welcome any physicians viewing along to join in. Today is the beginning of my medical education and training as a physician. I acknowledge my responsibility to continue the pursuit of knowledge and understanding until that day when I will cease to be a practicing physician. I am entering training for a noble profession in which my interests must always be subservient to those who may seek my assistance. I must be ever conscious of the value of my fellow health professionals and treat them with respect at all times. My classmates at St. George's University are now my colleagues, and I owe to them the same support and encouragement to achieve their goals as I hope to receive from them. I will work alongside my colleagues and professors with tolerance, compassion, and honesty. I acknowledge my obligation to adhere to the University Honor Code and to conduct myself with integrity and in an ethical manner at all times henceforth. I shall do all within my power to show in myself an example of all that is honorable and good throughout my medical career. It's a privilege to have been given the opportunity to become a physician. May I ever be conscious of that privilege and never abuse it. As we draw to a close, on behalf of SGU, I would like to thank the Arnold P. Gold Foundation for the Humanism in Medicine pins placed on each student's white coat. Students, families, faculty, staff, and administrators from both our Northumbria and Grenada campuses, thank you for your support and presence at this ceremony. I would also like to say a special thank you to all our inspiring speakers, including Dr. G. Richard Olds, our keynote speaker, whose message was truly motivational to us all.